Hey everyone, and welcome back. And today we are talking all about the new moon solar eclipse coming up, happening in the sign of Aquarius on Tuesday, February 17th at 28 degrees of Aquarius. And this is not like a gentle reset point that we tend to get with new moons, because it does carry this like intense underlying eclipse energy. Even though it's only visible in parts of Antarctica and partially visible in parts of South America, in Chile, in Argentina, I believe. And so if you're in those areas, it might be like, a bit like more intense of an eclipse. But if you're not in those areas, then just think of this as like a really potent and intense new moon. And with this eclipse happening in the sign of Aquarius, this is like the first eclipse that we're getting in this Leo and Aquarius axis that will be unfolding later this year and into 2027 and even into 2028. And so this is like, fresh and brand new energy that we're getting with this one, because it's the first eclipse in this series of eclipses that we're going to get in Leo and Aquarius over the next couple of years. And because it's in Aquarius, it really carries like this visionary and innovative quality that's really urging us to connect with community and break out of our comfort zones and break out of the status quo, especially because it's also forming a very strong square to the planet Uranus, who is stationed at 27 degrees of Taurus like this whole month. And Uranus is that planet that shakes things up, and it brings these unpredictable changes sometimes, but it also brings awakenings, and it brings like this divine inspiration. And so this is a very inspired new moon. So if you're interested in how this new moon solar eclipse is going to be experienced along with eclipse season and, all the other astrology we've got going on, then feel free to like and subscribe so you can stay updated on what's going on in the sky. And also, if you're new here, hi, I'm Mackenzie, aka Astromac, and I'm a professional astrologer, and I talk all things astrology on this channel. And I also have a Patreon, and I offer a bunch of different readings, so I'll be sure to link all of that down below. Now, before we get any further, let's pull up the chart for this new moon solar eclipse and dive right in. And so first things first, let's talk about what eclipses are. And so eclipses are not like these rare or bad or scary things. They actually happen twice a year, and they come in pairs. So we get 4 eclipses every year. So they're not rare, but they're also not like bad or scary, but they are these times of like, where profound growth tends to occur. And as we know, growth is not something that's comfortable or easy. And so eclipses kind of act as like these catalyst moments that tend to bring like, times of growth spurts. And so they tend to bring like these cosmic plot twists and turns that can be unexpected, but it's kind of like we're just in like the interesting and juicy part of a story where there's just like, a lot going on. Even though it does feel like we've kind of been in like that dramatic, like just intense part of the plot for like months and months at this point. Like I kind of feel like that dog in that meme that's like, this is fine. And I do think that things will probably rev up even a little bit more during this eclipse season, just because of, the events that have been leading up to where we are now. But it could also help point us in a new direction, because again, eclipses bring like these plot twists and these, turns, and they open new opportunities. And so I do think that these eclipses, especially this new moon solar eclipse that we've got, will help kind of, steer us in a new direction and point us in a new direction, especially because of Uranus's involvement. It's forming a very, tense square to this lunation. And so I do think it may be like a new direction that we didn't even know was possible, or a direction that we had never even thought of before. And so before we really get going here, let's talk about what even is a solar eclipse. And so basically a solar eclipse is just a really intense and potent new moon. And a new moon is when the sun and the moon come together in the sky and they form a conjunction, blending their energies, and it signals the beginning of new cycles. And so a solar eclipse is just like a really intense new beginning. And so new moons are these times of like introspection and reflection, where we're thinking about like those seeds that we want to plant and the intentions we want to set, whether it's like a dream or a vision, or just like, what do you want to do with your life moving forward? And so astronomically speaking, during a solar eclipse, it's when the moon passes between Earth and the sun, and she temporarily blocks out the sun's light from Earth's perspective. And the reason we don't get solar eclipses and lunar eclipses every month is because the moon's orbit around Earth is tilted. And so eclipses can only happen when the sun, moon, and Earth are aligned just right. And that is indicated by the position of the lunar nodes. And so this eclipse that we have on the 17th is what's known as an annular solar eclipse, meaning there's going to be like a ring of fire that we see around the moon. But again, this is only going to be visible in parts of Antarctica, and then it's only going to be partially visible in parts of South America, and then like barely visible even in parts of Southern Africa. And so it's probably going to be a little bit more intense in those places, but then for the rest of us, it's just a really intense and potent new moon. And so it's like there's just like this underlying undercurrent of intense eclipse energy that we have during eclipse season. And so actually, eclipse seasons tend to be known as these times that, tend to feel more fated, where it feels like the events happening and like, the situations that are happening externally and, the feelings that we're feeling internally, as well as like, people that we might meet, it all just tends to feel like it's fated and like it's, meant to happen, or it's like written in the stars or whatever. And so even though this is a time where things tend to feel more fated, don't forget that you have free will. Like, even though there may be these external situations and events that are happening that you have no control over, try to remember that you are in control of how you respond to these things. And so my best advice when dealing with eclipses is to, do your best to just go with the flow and ground yourself as much as you can, especially because this one is happening in the sign of Aquarius, and Aquarius has a very like ungrounding energy. And so again, with new moons, they tend to signal new beginnings and the start of new cycles. And with this being a north node solar eclipse, that means that we're reflecting on like where we want to go, because south node is where we come from, and then north node is like, that direction that we're meant to grow in. And the north node is not exactly the most comfortable space because it's like this unknown and new territory. But again, it's all about this direction that we're meant to grow in. And so there is this quality of like needing to break out of our comfort zone and needing to do something differently and do something that we've never done before. And so I was feeling like this new moon kind of marks a bit of a crossroads moment for us that, gives us the opportunity to pivot or move in a new direction if we want to, or in some cases we may be forced to move in a new direction. But if you're already feeling like you're ready to move into this new territory or move in a direction that your soul may be like pulling you towards, then again, this eclipse can really act as a catalyst energy that can help like launch you or catapult you in a direction that you want to go. But then conversely, if it is time for you to make a change and you feel it and you know it deep down, but you're kind of resisting and digging in your heels, then this might be where it feels like we're forced to, move in a new direction. But the main objective of eclipses, especially if they're activating any of your natal planets or other placements, is that they're really helping to, nudge you back onto your intended pathway for this lifetime. And it can be a very like broad nudge. And that's like that fated quality I was talking about earlier, where it's like a time where it might feel like there's just new doors of opportunity starting to open. And, all those doors that are no longer meant for you just start shutting. And so again, you want to do your best to go with the flow and not resist any doors trying to shut. And so if you have any planets or points around this 28 degrees of Aquarius or even 28 degrees of Leo, Taurus, or Scorpio, then you'll probably be feeling this a little more intensely. But again, the main objective of eclipses is to just help nudge you back onto your intended pathway for this lifetime and onto that path that you're meant to be on, and in that space that is most in alignment with like, your authentic frequency and, like who you are now and who you want to grow into. And it's not always like a super obvious nudge or push. A lot of times it's more subtle and it shows up as like an inner knowing, or just like there's a subtle internal shift that then could motivate you or inspire you to change paths. Whether it's like a changing career or like, you're moving to a different state, or you're starting something new, like a new project, or it could be even that you're saying yes to a dream that you never even thought could be possible. And so really pay attention to those things that are inspiring you during this eclipse and like throughout this eclipse season, and just pay attention to those things that really ignite like that passionate drive from within you, because those are like those gentle nudges from the universe and like those quiet whispers from the universe that are really calling to you and trying to nudge you back onto your intended path. And so with this new moon happening at 28 degrees of Aquarius, that means those Aquarius themes of freedom and liberation and innovation and inspiration and experimentation and breaking out of the status quo are the main focus here. And if you haven't watched my Aquarius 101 video yet, I highly recommend, because I gave a lot of, good details about what Aquarius is. And so that'll give you a better idea of what this new beginning could be about. And so we're kind of reaching like the edge of Aquarius territory here with it at the 28th, almost the 29th degree. And so even though this is a new moon that's all about new beginnings, there is this sense that something is coming to an end here. And that's being accentuated even more because the North Node is currently in Pisces, but it's going to change signs later in the year in July when it moves into Aquarius. And so it's kind of like we're in this weird like liminal space where it's like there's new beginnings happening, but there's also some endings happening. And so there is this sense that we're kind of like, leaving something behind in order to shift our focus forwards and to the future. And so I was kind of viewing it as it's like we're clearing away the clutter in this area of life where we have 28 degrees of Aquarius. And it's like we're asking ourselves, what do I feel ready to release or let go of in this area of life in order for me to stand firmly in my truth or my sovereignty or in my own integrity? And so even though there is like somewhat of like an ending quality here, I would say that like with it being a North Node eclipse and it being in Aquarius, it's much more like future oriented and future focused. And this is just the beginning of this eclipse series that will happen in this Leo and Aquarius axis over the course of the next couple of years. And so this just marks the beginning of a story. And so maybe taking some time to like reflect on those things or those people that have inspired you in the past and what about them, or, what about these things have inspired you? And then thinking about like what is inspiring you now and looking for like that common thread, because a lot of times there is something that is like similar about these people or these things that inspire us. And it may be that you have like a personal connection to it, whether it's like through past experiences or, whatever it might be. Because again, those things that are inspiring you and those things that you're just feeling called to, that's kind of like the universe trying to nudge you back onto your path and try to, pull you in a certain direction. And, that might be where you're feeling called to grow out of your comfort zone during this eclipse. And like I've said, growth can be really uncomfortable because it can stir up feelings of anxiety or fear or uncertainty. And so if you can really try to ground yourself and recognize that you are safe and you don't need to make like these big leaps and bounds outside of your comfort zone, because you can start small. It can start with these baby steps. Like this is not sprint energy. This is like, marathon energy, because that real lasting change doesn't usually happen overnight. And Aquarius energy has like the big picture in mind. It's got like that zoomed out perspective that sees the whole puzzle and it sees the whole picture, not just like the individual pieces. And it's a sign that's associated with like the collective and all of humanity. And so that includes our communities and our networks and our groups of friends. And it's this idea of like, working together within a group towards a common cause or with a common goal in mind. And it's revolutionary even. And so there's a very like futuristic quality to Aquarius, and that's why they're known as the visionary, because they're the ones who are envisioning a better future for all of humanity. So this is a time to kind of like let your imagination wander a bit and let yourself daydream and just kind of dream up what you want your future to look like, and let yourself be inspired by the people around you, and let yourself be inspired by like these humanitarian causes that are happening, and let these things instill hope within you. Like, you want to be putting your attention and your focus on those things that inspire you and those things that bring you hope, because that will help, create momentum in that desired direction. And so again, just kind of let yourself dream and be inspired, because it's not like we have to start taking steps on these things like immediately, but then, we also need to be like pulling energy from the ruler of this lunation being Saturn newly in Aries. And this is giving us like that courage and that bravery to really like, bust out of our comfort zone and really go places that we've never been before. And so Saturn is really asking us to like focus on a solid goal or vision or dream, and then kind of clear out the clutter again, get rid of the excess of, what doesn't serve this goal. And if this dream or vision or goal upgrades your life as well as the lives of others, whether it's like in your communities and in your networks, or, through your line of service, or in your family, or, wherever it might be, like if it upgrades your life as well as the lives of others, then that's even better, because Aquarius wants freedom and liberation for everyone, and it wants the best for everyone, like at its highest expression, because Aquarius is the sign of the humanitarian. And so this is a really great time to really start getting involved in like those causes that you care about, or those causes that you're really inspired by. And collectively, I do think that we will start to see an uptick in activism as the months go on, because eclipse energy rings out over 6 months to, a couple of years. And this is just the beginning. So I do think we'll start seeing more protests and more like marches on the street, and more people speaking up for those things that they believe in, and getting involved and taking action in ways that are aligned with like their values, and a call to humanity, really. Because in its highest expression, again, Aquarius wants freedom and liberation and equality for all. And I feel like this is being accentuated even more because this eclipse is forming a very tense square to one of the rulers of this lunation, being Uranus, who is stationed in Taurus. And Uranus is that planet that, brings disruptions, but also inspirations and liberation. And these kind of breakthroughs and like that inspiration to break out of our comfort zones may show up in these unexpected ways, because Uranus is very unpredictable. And squares create tension, but it's through this tension that really pushes us to get creative and innovate and do things differently and actually like take action. And so squares are like that tension or that friction that really pushes us to take action in order to grow. And so it's like creation through frustration. And so as we decide to start moving out of our comfort zone and to start taking action, this is what opens that door to like new pathways and new opportunities and new possibilities and new ways of thinking about things and new ideas and new inspirations and just like new ways of doing things. So this would be a great day and a great time to like do things outside of your normal routine, because when we're just like going about our daily lives and doing the exact same routines and doing the exact same thing every day, like day in and day out, it's kind of like we're following those exact same neural pathways every day. And the longer we stick to the same routine, the deeper those neural pathways get. And so Uranus is coming in to kind of help shake things up a bit and shake us out of our normal routine. And it's not like it has to be like this big, huge change. It can be something as simple as like, moving some furniture around, or, revamping your space and like redecorating, or, hanging up new art in your space, or, even just like opening a window and allowing that fresh air to come in, or, updating your website, or updating your portfolio, or, you could try a new walking path, or, taking the scenic route to work, or, trying out a restaurant you've never been to before, or, you get the idea. Because when we can break out of these patterns that we may be consciously or unconsciously repeating every single day, that can really, help us be more aware of our surroundings. And in turn, that can help us be, more open to new possibilities and new opportunities and, new ways of looking at things and just new things that we have never thought about before. And that can bring us, more inspiration, and it can help us like, problem solve and help us come up with, inventive solutions to things that we may be facing. Because when we can break out of those routines, then it can help create new neural pathways. And it's usually when we're doing things outside of our normal routine that something almost like serendipitous happens, or we see a synchronicity, or we get a sign that we've been looking for. And it may show up in the form of like a conversation that you have with a stranger, like, a Trader Joe's cashier, or it may show up on like a license plate or a bumper sticker or a billboard, or, there's multiple different ways. This is just ways that messages have shown up for me in the past. So you really want to be like opening yourself up to receiving these messages or this guidance or this inspiration. But, you also have to be grounded enough in order to receive these messages, because sometimes we can mix up like anxiety with like, that inspiration or whatever. But when we can really like open ourselves up enough to receive these Uranian downloads or the Uranian inspiration, or, these like divine messages that we may be looking for in order to help kind of guide us back onto our intended pathway for this lifetime, Uranus is also the great awakener, and so sometimes it does this by kind of like, shaking us awake a little bit, and so sometimes it might feel like it's like, shaking the ground that we're standing on, and it can make those things that, no longer support us or sustain us kind of crumble away, but it's doing this in order to rebuild something that is stronger and sturdier and more sustainable. And so Uranus transits are like that quote that's like, sometimes you got to break down in order to break through. And so sometimes these Uranus transits can feel a bit like an earthquake, especially because it's also in Taurus. But when you think about like those times where you have broken down and like you're going through a really tough time, like those are when you're asked to get creative and you're asked to innovate and you're asked to do things differently in order to find a solution for whatever is like, whatever is broken down and is no longer working for you. But if you've been feeling like you're stuck or you're stagnant or you just kind of like need some kind of change, but you're not really sure what, this square to Uranus can really bring that inspiration or even like those aha moments or like those eureka moments and those breakthrough moments again that can, strike like lightning. And it's kind of like, where we have these light bulb moments. And so again, just being grounded enough in order to, have that light bulb go off. And so I think asking for guidance during this time is going to be important. Like, don't ask for change because change can show up in a bunch of different ways. Like you want to be asking specifically for like, crystal clear guidance or for these like new ideas or asking for inspiration or asking for help in order to help you, move outside of your comfort zone or, asking for help in order to be more open to receiving these Uranian downloads, in order to help you break through and in order to help you find a solution for, whatever you may be dealing with or, for whatever reason that you may feel stuck or stagnant. Again, Uranus is here to help shake things up. And now Saturn, who is the co-ruler of this new moon solar eclipse, because Aquarius is ruled by both Saturn and Aquarius, but Saturn will have made a major move into the sign of Aries just like 3 days before this lunation. And then like 3 days after this lunation, Saturn goes on to form an exact conjunction with Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries. And this is a major, major transit this year. And so this transit alone is historic, but for this transit to coincide in eclipse season, I'm very, very intrigued to see what's going to be going on collectively on the world stage. But this is like a brand new beginning happening at the 0 degrees of Aries. And so it's kind of like the birth of a new world is happening with this conjunction. Like this 0 degrees Aries is kind of like when the seedling is just like starting to pop out of the ground. And so there's like a brand new beginning happening here, like with the Saturn Neptune cycle. And so there's like, a fresh start happening here with so much potential. Like 0 degrees Aries is like pure potential. Like think about when that seedling has just popped out of the ground. Like, no one knows what exactly it might grow into. Like we may have an idea, but no one knows what it's going to turn into for sure. So again, this is just like this energy of like, pure potential where anything is possible. And so with this like truly historic transit happening within this eclipse window, I do think that it's going to be a very significant few weeks and few months and few years and few decades, because this is just the start of a new Saturn and Neptune cycle that will be ringing out for many, many, many years to come. So it's kind of hard for me to wrap like my human brain around what kind of things might happen with a transit like this, because again, like anything is possible. But like broadly speaking, when Saturn and Neptune come together, this is all about making a dream real. It's kind of like with Neptune newly in Aries, it's kind of like dreamt about coming out of the ground, but then when Saturn comes through and ingresses into Aries and forms this exact conjunction with Neptune, it's really like, pushing us out of the ground, kind of like forcing us to take action. And that's what Aries energy is all about. It's all about being bold and brave and courageous and initiating action and doing it because, why the hell not? And when I think about like the two signs of Aquarius and Aries and how they're these energies that sextile each other, I think it's interesting because it speaks to me about like, finding community that encourages you and community that supports you in order to like, be yourself and, be your most authentic self. And then also like, being yourself in a group and shining your unique light in order to, find community who is aligned with you and your vision, and find other people who are like-minded, who can, work together in order to make these like real waves of change. And I think with Pluto in Aquarius, like again, finding community and finding a group of like-minded people in order to work towards a common cause is just going to be more and more important. And so now let's talk about some ways to work with this eclipse energy more intentionally. And so first and foremost, this is not the time to be making like any impulsive decisions or taking any impulsive actions or, making any like permanent changes, because during eclipse seasons, it's kind of like, things are eclipsed, and so things are obscured from our view, and so we're not seeing the whole picture here, and so it's kind of like there's things that are yet to be revealed. So don't be making any like impulsive exits or impulsive decisions, just trying to like, feel free. Also, try not to cling to like old structures or things that are like, have outlived themselves in your life just because they feel familiar. Just try your best to like, go with the flow and move with like the changes that are happening in your life. And again, try not to resist any kind of changes that are trying to happen. This is also a time to ground yourself, like ground. And so like, go outside and, move your body and exercise, or, dance and sing and, play with your pets, or like, drink warm tea, or, whatever helps ground you and get you back into your body and back into the present moment. Because eclipse energy and just, Aquarius energy in general can feel really like ungrounding. And so if you're like, prone to being overstimulated, like, maybe put down the caffeine and maybe like, put your phone down and stop doom scrolling if you can. And then after you've like grounded yourself sufficiently enough, this is when you can really be sure that those intuitive hits that you're getting, or like, those messages or those downloads are actual intuition and, not anxiety. Because we want to be staying like open and receptive to this time. And we want to be, grounded enough in order to receive this guidance or this inspiration. And so asking for guidance and asking for clarity and asking for courage, and then, listening and being open enough to, receive these things that we're asking for. And be open to it coming to you in unexpected ways. And let yourself be inspired during this time by, people and other things around you. And, open yourself up to new possibilities and new doors and new windows of opportunity. Like, if life has felt stagnant lately, maybe try opening a window and just, allowing that new air to come in, and then pay attention to new opportunities that could be presenting themselves in a variety of different ways and, unexpected ways. And so doing something like outside of your normal routine as well. Like, again, you could try a new route to work or a new walking path, or, rearranging some furniture and just like, switching out the decor in your house, or, just switching up your space and switching up your routine in some way, because this will help initiate the start of new neural pathways. And so that can also open you up to new ideas and new inspirations and just like new ways of looking at the world. Because it doesn't have to be like, this big move, like, across the country in order to initiate these new neural pathways. Although that's definitely one way of doing it, but, try to refrain if you haven't like, thought things through yet. But, you can just, again, start small, like, move things around your space. And then also like reflect on and pay attention to where you're feeling called to, like, where are you getting those inklings? Because I feel like the people who watch my videos, like, you're an intuitive bunch, and so you may be having like these intuitive hunches already. And so this may be a time to really start honoring those intuitive hunches and really start taking action in a way that is aligned with those little inklings and those little nudges you may be getting. And then really like, pull on the ruler of this new moon being that Saturn newly in Aries, and, be bold and be brave, and, don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone, just one baby step at a time. Or, maybe you're a big leaper, who knows? And so, yeah, there is a lot of inspired and exciting energy that this new moon solar eclipse brings when you can really, again, tune into it consciously and intentionally. And when you can go with the flow and not resist those changes that are trying to happen in your life. And so go out there and dream and let yourself be inspired and connect with community in order to create these, intentional waves of change. And yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about this new moon solar eclipse. I had a lot more to say, and I think collectively we will be seeing themes around like technology and AI and even more activism and things like that moving forward. And I think things around like renewable resources, but more on that later. And so if you've stuck with me this long, thank you so much for watching, and maybe comment down below where this new moon solar eclipse is happening for you and if it's aspecting any of your personal planets. And yeah, until next time, love you, bye!